Hi. Okay. Thank you, Simon, for helping me with that. And I'd like to say hello to everybody watching this presentation. I want to apologize. The last time we tried to do this live, we had some technical issues, and the recording didn't go that well, so we're doing it over again so you can enjoy this presentation. If you do have any questions, of course, we won't be able to answer them live, but you can write us, and we'll be sure to get back to you with any answer that we can have. So with that being said, I think we can go ahead and start with the presentation. Thank you, Simon. I'm going to shut off my webcam and get through the presentation. So we'll do that, and we're ready to go. Our subject today is, again, we're going to be talking about training, one of my most favorite subjects. And we're talking about training in the digital age, and I want to talk about the difference between human beings and robots. So just get to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to be discussing in this presentation two aspects of training: content and methodology, and I'm going to be starting with content. What should be included in our training to make it effective in the digital age? And I am specifically talking about food safety training, although I must say that most of what I'm going to be talking about is applicable for any kind of employee training that is focused on modifying or ensuring behavior. It could be environmental care, quality assurance, employee safety, communications. We could be talking about intellectual property protection, whatever. But specifically, this is a food safety network, so we're going to be talking about food safety. And interesting enough, if we look at the new ISO 22000 that was just released in June 2018, this new international standard for food safety management systems has been revised from its 2005 edition, and it has now been aligned with the new ISO 9001 that was published in 2015. And its a new high-level structure has a specific clause within clause 7, which is what we call support or resources, called competence. And competence is what we talk about when we talk about training. And if we look at the standard and open up item 7.2 and read what's written there, it says the organization shall, which is a requirement, and then it says A, determine the necessary competence of persons doing work that affects its food safety performance and the effectiveness of the food safety management system. FSMS is food safety management systems. This is a direct quote from ISO 22000, the new version. It is almost identical to what we would find if we opened up item 7.2 in ISO 9001. So it says determine the necessary competence. Well, what is necessary competence of persons doing work? That is the key question to building our training program. And I looked up competence in the dictionary, and the competence is the ability to do something successfully or efficiently. So competence talks about the ability to do something, the ability. We have to remember that. Now, when we look at competence as something that we want to deliver, that we want to ensure, then we have to understand what exactly is incompetence. And we identify that there are two natural components of any competency. And the first one is basic knowledge. So in order to be competent in something, to do a certain task, you must know that task. I can give you an example from my personal life. I am a veterinarian. I studied veterinary medicine over 25 years ago. And when we got to the part in our studies where we had to learn how to operate on an animal, our first operation we learned how to do was to spay a cat. So we got the textbook and we read how to spay a cat, and we had a little video showing us how to do it. And then we had a little examination, and I got 100 on my exam. I was a very good student, and I knew how to spay a cat. So the knowledge was there. Was I competent? Would you let me spay your cat at that point? I doubt it, because knowledge is the basic component of competence. We must add onto that the additional component of capability. And when ISO says that competence is, or when the dictionary says it, is the ability. Ability includes knowledge and capability, and some tasks, it's not enough to know, you have to be able to. And we're going to go back to that later on, so hang on to that concept. Now, when we talk about competency, we also often add artificial components. I call them artificial because they are not naturally born into the human being, but we've added them, and that is education and experience. So we may say, well, I need a food technologist. I need a food technologist to do product development. Well, in that case, I need somebody who knows food technologies, are capable of developing products, and I might add on to that, this person must have a degree in food engineering, which is education, and 5 years experience with dairy, which is what, and then that should be predictors of competence. I'm just saying this as this is a theoretical background that human resources uses to build competence, and this is actually very well reflected in ISO 22000. So if we go back to the standard, A was to identify competencies, but B is to ensure that these persons are competent on the basis of appropriate education, training, and or experience. So ISO is not telling us that we must train for food safety. It's saying that we must provide people that are competent. And we can do this either by training them or by using people who are educated to that extent, or they have the necessary experience and so forth. And C, ISO adds, where applicable, the organization must take actions to acquire the necessary competence and evaluate the effectiveness of the actions taken. And this says, well, we're not telling you as an organization to train anybody. All we're saying is identify competence, ensure that people are competent, and if you need to, take actions to acquire the competence. In other words, the standard is telling us, I'm not going to tell you to train, but you better be training people. Because if you have another way of making sure people are competent and you can show that it's effective, go ahead. I'm telling you, listeners, between me and you, this means 99% of the time, this means effective training. And so we're still talking about content and not methodology. So the content must include what needs to be delivered to people to make them competent, which is knowledge and ability. However, ISO 22000 does not stop there. Okay? So when we must take actions to acquire necessary competence and evaluate the effectiveness, this is the methodology I'm going to be talking about later. So take actions and evaluate, we're going to be talking about methodology. Right now I still want to go back to content. So number one is knowledge. Number two is capability. These are two things that we're going to be delivering. But then ISO surprises us with a new clause called awareness, which previously was not its own clause. It was built into the previous one. And beginning of ISO 9001, 2015, and the high-level structure standards that are aligned with it, we have a new clause called awareness. And this is really, really interesting. Because what ISO is doing, it's sharing with us, the people who wrote the standard now understand that in order for somebody to do what they're supposed to be doing, it's not enough that they know and are capable, but they must also be aware of the reason why, the logic behind it. Now, some people may argue this is not necessarily so. I want to be talking about that in a second. Let's see what the standard says in its own words. The organizations shall ensure that all relevant persons doing work under the organization's control shall be aware of the following. A, the policy, food safety policy. B, the food safety objectives. So I can't just tell you, listen, dear employee, it is your job to wrap the sandwiches and wrap them according to this work procedure, and this is what you have to do, and I'll show you how to do it. Show me you can do it, and now you are competent to wrap sandwiches. That's not enough. I can bring somebody to a high competency of wrapping sandwiches, the standard says, in addition to that, this person must also know our food safety policy. It must know our food safety objectives. It must know, C, their individual contribution to the effectiveness of the food safety management system and include benefits of improved safety performance. And lastly, this person must also be aware of the implications of not conforming with the food safety management system requirements. So if we look at A, B, C, and D, we are adding a whole tier of awareness on top of the basic competence, and this is a standard requirement. And we must ask ourselves, okay, 7.2 is obvious. You can't perform a task if you're not competent to do it, but why should awareness be a requirement? Why add 7.3? And that's a key question, and it's important to understand when we're teaching people, and this is where, when I talk about the digital age, why there's a connection. Because before the digital age, in past years, and I'm talking about 40, 50 years ago, employees generally would do what they were told, and all you had to do was make sure they're competent and the task would be done. We did not have that need for awareness. But this is a new age. This is a new time in history where people are connected digitally and they have all the knowledge that they need, and they are highly aware of what they're doing, and this is a good thing. But what it does, it adds to the employers, the people making decisions, the burden of having to explain to people the reason why it's important to make them aware of why they're doing it. What is our policy? What are our objectives? What is good about what you should be doing, and what is bad if you don't? That's the A, B, C, D we talked about previously. I'm going to give you an example with when we're talking about the difference between a robot and a human being, because both a robot and a human being need competence. So here's a picture of, on the left, of a dishwasher, which is a robot that does dishes, and on the right there's a picture of me doing dishes. Well, that's actually not me, but you can't see me, so what do I care? So both of these dishwashers, the human dishwasher and the machine dishwasher, must be competent. They have to know how to wash dishes and be able to do it, and they are totally competent. Will the result of their work be identical? The answer is yes, if the person washes the dishes according to the procedure. Then yes. If not, then no. This is less of a question with the robot dishwasher. It's more of a technical issue, and that's the difference between human beings and machines. Competence is not enough. Why? Because let's say I'm doing dishes. I know exactly how to do the dishes. I know exactly what has to be done step by step. I've been taught. I've passed the examination, and I know the procedure. And now I get down to the part where I look at the bottom of the sink, and I have these 30 pieces of silverware that I have to wash, and the protocol says pick up each one, take a sponge and scrub it individually in order to obtain the degree of cleanliness required, and then rinse it off and put it out to dry. Well, I'm saying to myself, hey, it looks clean. I have to wash each one of them separately. That's stupid. That takes a long time. It takes a lot of energy. Nobody will know. How about I just take them all, grab them all in my hand and spray water on them, and then I'm done. I did it faster. These are thoughts that don't go through the mind of a machine, but they do go through the mind of a human being. And that is why the ISO standard added awareness into a requirement, because maybe, just maybe, if I understand as a human dishwasher the reason why they must be done according to the protocol that was written, and I understand that Listeria monocytogenes has a film that may cling to the dishes, and that's why I can't do this little shortcut that I've devised for myself, because I am actually going to jeopardize public health. And we have a policy as an organization to protect public health. And we have targets, and we have goals. And if I don't do it properly, this and this will happen. If I do it properly, then something else will happen. This is the awareness required. These are questions that never cross the mind of the robot dishwasher. And as long as human beings are doing tasks that require understanding, we have to be able to deliver awareness. So that is why, and when we talk about content, that is why we have to understand that content must always include, in the digital age, the reason why. What is behind it? How do we build the motivation to want to do something that otherwise I may decide not to do when nobody's looking or when nobody's supervising me? So just to sum up what I said, I have the slide says technological and social change have brought us to the point where people are not expected to perform tasks merely because it is their job. This has changed, and this change includes a number of things. One of them is human rights, nothing to do with digitalization, but just basic human rights. In an age where everybody is treated equally, then people have a right to understand why they're doing what I'm asking them to do. The fact that I pay you money to work for me does not mean that I own you or that I can boss you around without explaining why. It's a matter of basic human rights. This is a new issue that has emerged in the last few dozen years only. And the availability of information. Everybody has all of the knowledge in the palm of their hands. So the fact that management once knew everything and people didn't know anything doesn't exist anymore. Now people have an understanding in depth, and I can't tell them stories and I can't make things up. I have to respect the fact that they have as much access to information as I do. And finally, these two changes in our world have caused a motivational shift. And what used to motivate people is changing constantly, and it's going from external motivators to intrinsic, internal motivators, and this is fascinating. So this is one of the things I'm going to be talking about. I just recently in May 2018 participated in the last conference that was organized by the wonderful organization called ATD. ATD is the Association for Talent Development, an international organization. If you are interested in human resources and training and education, then I do recommend joining the ATD, the Association for Talent Development, and taking advantage of the information and the conferences. And one of the most interesting parts of the previous conference that was in San Diego was talk about motivational shift. One of the most fascinating lectures I went to was a lecture by Professor Susan Fowler, who spoke about her book, which is called Why Motivating People Doesn't Work and What Does. And Susan doesn't know that I'm using that I'm promoting her work. I'm sure she'd be happy. I'm not getting any royalties for that, unfortunately, and I do recommend looking into that. She presented in San Diego in the ATD conference a research paper that was published in HRD and the magazine called Advances in Developing Human Resources, called a New Curriculum in Leadership Competencies, and talking about advances in motivation science, which call for rethinking leadership development. And just in a nutshell, this motivational shift means that we as educators in food safety have to shift the way we educate people and train them. Just in a nutshell, what we call this, what scientists and motivational scientists, psychologists call self-determination theory, which explains this motivational shift, talks about three major drivers that drive motivation today: competence, autonomy, and relatedness, which are coming from the inside of people, not from the outside. So if we want somebody to clean that machine really well, then yelling at him and saying, you better clean that machine very well. If you don't clean that machine very well, you're going to get in trouble. I'm going to fire you. Or if you clean it really, really well, I'll give you a bonus, and and so forth and so on. These motivators are less relevant to the modern digital age employee who want to feel or act on three components that are part of their the build of their psyche. The feeling of competence. I am competent. I can do this. This empowers me as a human being. Autonomy. You don't tell me what to do. I decide it myself. I have my own independent thinking. And relatedness. I want to feel related to something. I want to feel that I belong to this. I'm doing it for a cause, for a belief. This is really interesting. And it has an impact on our choice of content and the way we do training. I have a few case studies that I'm currently involved in, that I'm working with. Big food companies that employ many employees. Most of them are doing menial labor, manual, minimum wage, very difficult work, often has the potential to be boring and just potential for a lot of food safety incidents coming from people just working with lack of motivation of what they should be doing. And then when I have to wash my hands after using the toilet, then why should I? I mean, do the whole 20-second thing that I have to do, or fill out this form, or do my glass audit, or whatever I'm required to do. Why should I do all this just because I'm told to? Well, no. And what we are now doing in some of these food companies, as part of the new way of delivering content, we're talking about methodology, is creating a story that the employees can relate to, that has to do with their connection with their customers, and bringing food employees to understand that they have a very, very important role in the human food value chain, and that they're not just coming to work to get the day over with. There's a reason that they are working in the food industry, and they just could have well been working in textile or in retail and any other type of job, but they are food employees, which makes them a special category of human beings. They have the unique position on Earth among humanity to actually deliver people their food. And this is an interesting concept that many people don't stop to think about, and we've been talking about it a lot, that in the current age, most people in the modern Western world never meet their food until it's ready to eat. They have no idea what happens to their food from the moment from the farm up to the fork. And what human beings have done, they've if you wish, sort of outsourced the feeding themselves to a small number of people in society who grow the food, pick it, sort it, pack it, prepare it, wash it, and package it, distribute it, and eventually hand it over to them in the supermarket or in a restaurant, or at the place of work where they're in the cafeteria, and they're only involved in the eating part. And this means that this small number of human beings in the food industry have the role and the responsibility of making sure these people get safe food. And this is a big deal. It's a big deal. And when you think about it that way and present it that way, you are creating relatedness among the people who are doing that job. And that is the first stage of saying, okay, there's a purpose to what I'm doing. I mean, life is not fantastic, but I'm not just going to work every day and complaining. I'm doing something with value. And of course, I have to be proud of the brand that I'm working for, the company that I'm working with. I have to be proud of the people I'm working with. And when we talk about causing autonomy and giving the feeling of competence, which is part of motivators, this means that managers must find more and more ways to involve employees in decision making. Not this is the way we said it should be done, now you go do it, but tell me what you think. What is your idea? How do you think we should be doing it? Do you have a better idea than we do? Does this appeal to you? Do you think, and so forth and so on. This can be done in risk assessments, should be done in risk assessments, specifically HACCP, HACCP, or HARPC, any type of risk assessment. It should be done involving employees. The employees should be encouraged to report on difficulties, to report on new ideas. This is the new world of managing, and based on the self-determination theory. So just to recap, before we move on to the part where I'm going to be talking about methodology a little bit, why do people misbehave? When I say misbehave, I mean why don't food employees always work according to the specific requirements? What are the reasons? And this is a recap on a previous webinar that I gave a few years back in IFSQN on behavioral-based food safety, and I do recommend going back and watching that or reading the article. And reason number one is I didn't know that, blah, blah, blah. In other words, knowledge had not been delivered, so I was caught smoking where I wasn't supposed to be smoking, not because I'm not motivated, because I didn't know the rules. And of course, our training efforts must be aimed basically at delivering knowledge. B, I wasn't able to. I didn't have the ability or the capability. And A and B together build what we call competence. C, oops, I forgot. And we'll be talking about that in a minute. And sometimes people are totally competent, but specific task they were supposed to do, they just slipped their mind. And finally, I decided not to. I was competent, totally competent, but it was my decision not to do that or to do something else, for any number of reasons. The largest reason being, or the most popular reason being, that I don't really understand why this is important, and it's just because you told me to do it is not enough for me, which is where awareness comes into play. So if we look at how that impacts our training program or education program, then we have their level, our basic tier of transfer of knowledge, and then building capability or capacity by on-the-job training and demonstrating, and refresher training to remind people not to forget stuff. And I do want to remind you that I've spoken in previous lectures about catastrophic forgetfulness that can cause severe damage to the public, should be dealt with a poka-yoke approach, meaning I do not want people to have to remember crucial things. I would rather engineer that, the possibility of forgetting, engineering it out of their day-to-day routine. So instead of reminding people, putting up a sign, this door must be kept closed, please do not forget to close the door, over and over again, just adding a little spring mechanism to the door and having it close by itself. People have enough things to worry about. Or at the entrance to the production area, I will put a sanitary barrier that forces you to sanitize your hands before entering, not as an enforcement tool, but as a reminder, because otherwise you might just walk through. I want to stress this. People think that these sanitary barriers have any kind of enforcement effect. They do not. If somebody does not want to wash their hands, they won't, no matter what kind of barrier you use. That's something that's worth thinking about and remembering. But as a poka-yoke engineering solution to remove the need to remember to wash your hands from that person's mind and just put a barrier there, that is definitely a solution. It's not a training solution, it's an engineering solution. But refresher training is important no matter what, for just to keep things top of mind. And for reason D, the fourth reason, we must use our educational program to create motivation, give that extra tier of understanding why things should be done, and causing and creating relatedness by making them part of the organization, making them benefit from the benefit of the organization, and just keeping people motivated by thinking about their need for competence, for relatedness, for autonomy. So that was just an overview of the content that we should be looking at when we build a food safety training program in the digital age. We must make sure that we're not just delivering frontal knowledge, just to everybody sign them off and say, yeah, now that I have proof that you know what you should be doing and you're competent, then I am now confident that things are going to get done as I expect them to. We must understand the need for refresher training and for motivational programs that are part of our training program. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about methodology. Our scope of lecture does not allow us to go into real depth or the breadth of what I would like to be talking about, but just a few things that are noteworthy trends that are going on today in today's training. So looking just at methodology, we have some interesting learning trends. They're all connected somehow to the age of digital training and to the fact that there is a difference between human beings and robots. So there is a continual shift towards individual learning, not class, as opposed to classroom learning. So individual learning for using PCs, handheld devices, and or information kiosks, depending on the technology available. This year, 2018, a recent study showed for the first time in history the amount of training in the workplace being done individually using computer platforms is larger than the amount of training being done in classrooms. This has been a trend for years that more and more training is being done individually on computer platforms and less in classroom, but classroom was still the majority up until this year. This is the first year that we've seen that classroom training has lost its majority, and from now on, we're going to see that trend is going to continue. We're going to see less and less classroom training. I strongly believe, especially because I am myself a traditional classroom trainer, I do strongly believe that trend is going to peak at a certain point, and we're not going to see the total demise of the traditional classroom training, but we're going to see some kind of status quo with some kind of balance. There may even be, in the next 10, 15 years, a little bit of regression from the individual learning trend and a little bit back into classroom. But the change is here to stay. Another thing that we've been seeing, which ties into what I just finished, what I just said when I finished the last point, was we're seeing more blended learning. Blended learning is a term that we use at the hybrid or blended, meaning that we blend when we do a course. Part of it is done online, individually, and part of it is done in classroom. And typically, the choosing what content to deliver in each one of the formats is easy, because what we're saying is anything that has to do with transfer of knowledge can be done in the absence of a trainer, of a human trainer. So transfer of knowledge. So transfer of knowledge means that I don't know something and I learn it and now I know it. The knowledge has been transferred, is now part of my brain. It's now newly acquired knowledge. This can be done without an individual in a classroom. On the other hand, certain competencies that include ability, there's only, in some cases, there's just so much that a computer can teach you. At the end of the day, if you're going to learn how to clean out a machine, somebody's going to have to take you by the hand to the machine and show you how it's done. So part of the blended learning is on-the-job learning to supplement the basic knowledge. However, when we look at the awareness, part of awareness can be given using computerized training, just by telling stories and showing videos. But the presence of a human being to interact and to discuss and to do case studies is still something that is more beneficial than a computer. So blended means we're doing both classroom and individual for the same course. When I talk about using clickers, classroom engagement, we can either use clickers or smartphones. It just depends on what is available for the learner. So not all classes, everybody has a smartphone. Not in all classrooms we have Wi-Fi or the ability to use 3G. And we do want, so sometimes we're just using clickers. This system allows the teacher, as the class proceeds, to engage learners by asking them questions, and then they click the answers on their clickers. The answers show up on the screen, and it just keeps people who are digitally inclined and have a tendency to lose their patience when listening to a lecture. It allows them to be able to interact. When we do these webinars, that when they're not pre-recorded, but when we do them live, like I like to do it, then we will add into the webinar polls. So every once in a while, I'll stop and I say, okay, what do you guys think? And then on the sidebar, everybody clicks on their computers. They're involved. They're answering questions. We use the input, the reactions to make a point and so forth. So this is a really nice trend. One of the really cool applications out there is called Kahoot, Kahoot, which allows you to do like a trivia in the classroom using smartphones. Code is a really great tool. All the kids are using it, and I use it a lot in my classroom. The only downside is everybody has to have a smartphone, and you need internet, and it does not work in the PowerPoint environment. Some of these applications do work, other ones do work in a PowerPoint environment. Participole, Poll Everywhere, and some of them can also use clickers. We see a lot of gamification. People like to play games to learn, and I'm talking about not only digital gamification, also outdoor. Escape room type activities, solving mysteries, doing puzzles, and so forth, making learning into a game. Some great stuff out there that can be purchased. There's also organizations that supply those types of solutions, but also organizations can do it on their own. Just for instance, doing like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire type of game show type of learning as we proceed through the training is also just a great solution. And the number one trend that we're seeing emerging in 2018, I don't know if it's here to stay or not. I personally have a feeling that it is sort of a passing trend, but it cannot be ignored. The concept of microlearning. The concept of microlearning means that people don't have the capacity to learn for long periods of time, and they have to be fed their content in little bites. It's called microlearning. So 2, 3, 4 minutes a day, or maybe 3 minutes twice a day. And this is done using smartphone applications. So you just have content that's pushed at you. You're exposed to the message. You learn it, you react to it, and you move on with your day. And then later in the day, you'll get another one, or maybe the next day, or maybe a week from now, and you're constantly interacting with your device. Many organizations in the world now are providing content for microlearning. It's not as simple as taking a course and breaking it into little tiny bites. There's a methodology for that to be done, and there are people who specialize in creating microlearning environments. So this is something that's really interesting and should be aware of, especially beneficial in workforces where people are very, very busy and they do have access to their smartphones regularly. And finally, evaluation of training programs. This is the book written by Donald Kirkpatrick, who passed away recently, but left us with the Kirkpatrick model of evaluating the effectiveness of training. And this model is still as good as it always was. Donald really left us with a great legacy and the ability to be able to assess the effectiveness of how our training is doing. And at the end of the day, I'm going to go from the top to the bottom. If our educational program or our learning program does not deliver results, then it's not effective. I don't care how fun it was, how much money we spent, how involved people got. If the results aren't in, it was not effective, period. If we're receiving good results, that does not mean that it was definitely 100% due to the training, but it may have been. So, for instance, if I have an issue where I'm seeing in my factory, we have a lot of complaints about foreign bodies in our products, little debris, hair, and we want to combat that. Say, we're not tolerating that anymore. We want to change that. So we're going to do a lot of training with regard to personal hygiene, housekeeping, hand washing, hair nets, forbidding jewelry, and so forth. So that's going to be our training program based on that is the purpose, or the goal of our training is to reduce foreign body complaints. Well, if at the end of the day we don't see that reduction, no matter how fun it was, it didn't happen. The one tier under results is to see change in behaviors. So if we talked about people using their hairnets properly, and everybody got 100 in the examination and they learned it, but they don't use their hairnets differently, then it was not effective. And if that behavior wasn't changed, we won't see the results. In order for behavior to change, we must make sure that learning has happened. So whatever we want to deliver had to be delivered in order for the training the behavior to change, to get results. And at the bottom of the pyramid, training must create a reaction that allows learning. In other words, just sitting there passively listening to messages, we're not learning anything, we're just listening. But if I, during training, have people reacting, have them playing games, answering questions, doing something what they're learning, and that reaction is measurable, then I know that the learning is possible, and when the learning has been achieved, then I'll see a behavior change. And if I see the behavior change, I will receive the results I expected. So that's just a summary, a brief summary of the Kirkpatrick model of evaluating effectiveness of training. So to just that, the tier one would be the reactions. Did we have fun? Did we do something? What have we learned? And has our behavior changed? And finally, have we gotten results? That's Kirkpatrick. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's it for this webinar. I hope you enjoyed listening. I again apologize that when we did it live, we were having some technical issues that took some of the fun out of it. And I really hope that never happens again. But we're talking about training in the digital age, and the digital age is just starting for some of us. And sometimes the technology gets the better of us, and we're getting better and better at it. But that's part of the rules of the game is dealing with the technical issues. So again, if you did participate in a live webinar and were disappointed, I apologize. I hope this is a recap for you, and it could be useful in your organization. If you do have any questions, because we're not live, I can't answer you online, but do please write us, and I'll try to answer any questions you have. We all have one goal, and that is to allow people all over the world to eat whatever they want to eat and not get hurt. Make food safe for everybody. So I thank you again, and have a great day wherever you are.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Great ending message there. Very much appreciate you taking the time to come back and do this. I've just made a few notes myself, seeing as we haven't got any questions. And the main thing that came out is, the modern individual now, they want to have the context of why, the understanding, and feel part of something meaningful. And I guess that's in an organisation where everybody from top to bottom is all in together. Is that sort of, have I got the right idea there, would you say?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's impossible, in my opinion, to achieve any change in results resulting from a change in behavior if we only work with our employees to change their attitude and to provide them with the insights that I've been talking about. Top management must be involved as well. They must understand that in this new digital age, if their people don't feel the love and the caring, we talk a lot about servant leadership as a concept. I do encourage all listeners to Google servant leadership and see what's out there and learn more about that, what it means to be a modern leader in this world, and to lead people. And managers should not be asking what their workers should be doing for them, but what it is they're doing for their workers, because the workers eventually are the ones that pay the bills. So it's a complex issue, and it does have a lot to do with culture and attitude. But definitely, I mean, there's no doubt that to be able to achieve our goals in the modern world, employees must be empowered, and managers must be able to enable that and understand how beneficial it is for them. And and I realize that at the bottom line, everybody wants to make money and everybody wants to do a good business and look at the ROI, the bottom line. It is well proven that the investment in activities that make people more involved, making a workplace a beautiful place to work, working on the garden, on the employee facilities, the bathrooms, their changing rooms, their meals, just the signage and the way people are dressed. These are all costs that are taken off the bottom line, but they all have a return on investment when we talk about the quality issues, less garbage, less mistakes, less food safety issues, and lowering the chance of having a catastrophic food safety incident. So it is the cost of doing business in the modern world, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So, you said you went to the conference. Was it ADT?
ATD.
ATD, and you saw the presentation and the book that you mentioned. So, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is that, in the modern world, is that still applicable or is it obsolete?
It is. That was spoken about. Yes, that the Maslow hierarchy is now being modified or being understood in different terms. It's still there, but the basic needs of people at the bottom of the pyramid are still never go away. People have to eat, drink, and stay alive, and they have to have sex and then have to have a roof over their heads. But the things that are motivating people to actually behave differently have shifted, and it is now coming from your inside, from intrinsically, and we want people to do the right thing when we're not looking at them.
Yes,
which is
okay. But in most organisations, what you're talking about there is an aspiration. In a lot of organisations, they are not that far advanced. So we do rely very much on hierarchy. And what's your feeling about frontline managers? The importance of shop floor supervisors, because obviously they're the lowest level of management, but in many ways they're probably the most important. What do you think about the role of the frontline manager?
You just said it. I mean, I like to talk about achieving goals in terms of the Deming cycle of continual improvement. Plan, do, check, act, the PDCA cycle. It's the basis for all the ISO requirements and all management systems. And we really look at it and analyze PDCA, then traditionally planning is the plan is done by top management, the decision makers, the engineers, the people who decide what should be done, write the procedures, and the do is the workforce. They do whatever you're told, and it's simple. You plan, do. Well, the barrier between plan, do has been broken down. That's what I've been talking about when we're talking about the modern age, and the liaison between the planners and the doers are the frontline managers, the middle managers. These are the people who are actually taking what has been decided to be done and bringing it down to be executed and to be done. And because we are more and more relying on the employees' inputs in the planning, when I say breaking down the barrier, it means our plan consists of more and more of inputs from employees. That mediator between the workshop worker, the floor worker, to top management is the middle manager, has a more crucial role in communicating from the management down to the floor, and from the floor, most importantly, back up to management, and allowing that to happen, being open to that. So many of these middle managers have been educated, especially if they're my generation, around my, I'm like 60s born, 1960s. These people have been brought up in an environment, a cultural environment, where there's a will, there's a way. That's how I was brought up. And if you work hard enough, you'll get anything done, and that's not really true all the time. And if I don't have the tolerance to be able to listen to people and to be able to discern when they're complaining just to complain and when they're actually verbalizing a true feeling that may cause them to do something wrong, I have to be open to that, and that's something we have to educate people to do. So middle management are a key element in our training programs. We deliver specifically seminars and workshops for them to re-educate them on dealing with this new millennial workforce of people who they used to be simple workers, but these are people who leave the workplace and they're on their smartphones and they're on Facebook and they're tweeting, and the world is changing. And I'm talking about all over the world, in developing and semi-developed countries as well, not only in the Western world.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you very much, David. Like I say, I appreciate you coming back today. It's a shame because the best part, I'm sure you'll agree, is that engagement with the audience, and shame can have it. But it's fantastic, and this won't be your last visit with IFSQN.
Okay.
I'm sure. All right.
So I'm not fired, right? That's what you're saying.
Oh, no. You're right at the top of the list, David. So
okay. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you very much.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.